Welcome back to FryMinis. I'm Eric, and today in our continuing coverage of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, we've got a big one: how to create a Darklord. So the Darklord, this is the big bad of that domain of dread. Each domain of dread is basically built around a Darklord. So this is a pretty important person. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard already online, there are no stat blocks for the Darklords. I think that's good. That way you can scale it up and down to whatever your party is, if it makes sense. But it also gives the idea of moving the Darklord away from, this is ultimately what you need to kill, to almost like part of the setting, kind of background, like the landscape, where it's just a force of nature that the party deals with more than literally just stabs. So we've got a bunch of information in here on how to build our own Darklord, so let's just jump right in. Domains are mocking reflections of the evils they confine. Each has a purpose, being a prison designed to torture a deliberately chosen villain. To devise a domain of dread, you must first conceive its central antagonist and prisoner, its Darklord. The following section details how to develop a Darklord that contrasts your characters and can serve as a central rival in your horror adventures. See, that's why it's so important to have a strong antagonist here, since the world's built around them. A Darklord's memories, desires, mistakes, and evil deeds shape the domain's twisted lands, inhabitants, and features. You need not create these in a vacuum, though. When creating your own Darklord, consider the relationship that will define their evil in your adventures. Their conflict with your players' characters, just as a Darklord is the inspiration for a domain, players' characters can be a source of inspiration for a Darklord. Consider a Darklord a sinister reflection of these characters. If you explore this connection, have your players create characters that involve them in the process of creating a Darklord in the following ways. What to reflect. Ask your players which of their characters' personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws are their favorites. Request at least 2 favorites from each player. Write them down. If players have been playing characters for a while, ask them to rewrite these personal characteristics to reflect who their characters are now. Exaggerated reflections. For each favored personal characteristic, imagine and write down a version twisted to its extreme. For example, transform "I idolize a particular hero of my faith" and constantly refer to that person's deeds and examples into "I'm obsessed with a hero of my faith and I must become exactly like them so I can take their place." The more unreasonable, the better. Opposite reflections. For each favored personal characteristic, imagine and write down its opposite, specifically a version that compels characters into conflict. For example, transform "I idolize a particular hero of my faith" and constantly refer to that person's deeds and examples into "I loathe a particular hero and their followers. I will prove the hypocrisy of that person's deeds and example. The harsher, the better." Use these exaggerated and opposite reflections as inspiration for creating your Darklord. By basing your Darklord on intimate details drawn from the player's characters, you create a feeling that the characters are trapped inside a collective nightmare. Through their interactions with the Darklord who mirrors them, characters discover how easily they could become the villains they face. I love it. I think there's a pretty big split generally between people who think a world should be a world and the characters just happen to be in it, versus cater the world to your characters. I like to customize the world based around my players and their characters. I see why people would like a non-personalized world. It makes the world seem bigger than the characters. So like if, let's say you have a party of all wizards and you throw in a flame-tongue longsword. Yeah, that's just what happened to be in the dungeon. I get it, but now the party has this flame-tongue and what are they going to do with it? So I like to personalize. Darklords aren't mindless killing machines. They are full but monstrous individuals. In a few sentences, describe who the Darklord was before they chose to become irredeemable. For inspiration, consider how the Darklord is a reflection of the player's characters. You might also look ahead to the genres of horror section to see if any of these types of horrors seem right for your Darklord. Then consider the following questions. Where was the Darklord before the mists took them? Who was the Darklord's family? How was the Darklord's family oppressed, oppressive, or both? What was the Darklord's childhood like? Whom did the Darklord care about? Who cared about the Darklord? Who hurt the Darklord? Whose respect or love did the Darklord crave? What did the Darklord value? Consult the Dungeon Master's Guide or the This Is Your Life section of Xanathar's Guide to Everything for additional inspirations for your Darklord's motivations. Yeah, so if we were just building a boss for a random dungeon fight, yeah, that's not a big deal. Okay, maybe his family was killed by the King's men and he wants to become a bandit. Like, okay, that's enough for that. But this, we're talking about somebody who this entire realm is built around. We need to flesh it out. We've got a special call-out section, Darklords from the Taroka. If you have a Taroka fortune-telling deck detailed in Chapter 4 and featured in the Adventures of Curse of Strahd, consider using the power of fate to shape the Darklord you're creating. As you proceed through the Darklord and domain creation process in this chapter, with each new decision, draw from the deck to help inspire your choices. Take note of the drawn card's name, physical orientation, and suit. A card drawn upside down represents the opposite of its original meaning. That's good. I like randomized stuff when you have to work with what you have or what you've drawn kind of thing here. There's a quote that I'm going to butcher, but it's something like creativity thrives when it's constrained or something like that. When you have to work within certain boundaries. I'm a strong believer of that, and so sign me up. Detailing the Darklord's personality gives them a unique identity that will help motivate them in your adventures. To do this, give them ideals, bonds, and flaws similar to those you would give any NPC as detailed in the section on creating non-player characters in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Ideal. In one sentence, describe any ideal that the Darklord holds dear and that governs their greater actions. Bond. In one sentence, describe a person, place, or object that the Darklord desires. Avoid a bond that is simply about power. Power isn't an end to itself. Power is a means to obtain a bond. Flaws. In one sentence, describe how the Darklord's personality causes them to act against their own best interest, especially in their quest to win their bond and desire. Flaws are often a negative emotion or destructive behavior, such as fear, hatred, insecurity, jealousy, mayhem, obsession, selfishness, shame, that drives an irrational habit causing the Darklord or others harm. Alternatively, you can choose to randomly determine a flaw from the Fatal Flaws table. The Fatal Flaw table is a D10. Once someone questions me, I won't stop until I befriend them and then betray them. Others' concerns bore me, and I would rather have my lessers handle everything possible. I am always right, and anyone who doesn't agree with me is cut out of my life. When someone loves me, I will do anything for them, no matter whom they hurt. I've given up resisting my habits and indulged myself whenever possible. I would rather be righteously angry at problems than solve them. I assume everyone is lying to me, even my most trusted allies, and I constantly test their loyalty. I don't know love, only domineering obsession, and I chain objects of my affection to pedestals. When I see something priceless or rare, I sacrifice all of my beliefs and loyalties to possess it. I'm distrustful of anyone who seems pure of heart and will prove to all their admirers how secretly ugly they are. Yeah, so there's a term, a villain you love to hate, and this is what we're setting up here. Darklords aren't misunderstood souls condemned through no fault of their own. If a person's potential for evil is particularly great, the dark powers might indirectly nurture further transgression, but they don't force individuals to undertake actions against their will. When an evildoer's wickedness ripens, the dark powers engulf them forever. When creating your Darklord, consider the depth of their greatest evil and what made it more significant, abominable, or poetic than more common forms of villainy. The following elements all might be aspects of this corruption. Evil acts. The dark powers consider an act to be evil if it is intentional, unnecessary, and successful, and, most importantly, if it causes significant harm. Accidents, self-defense, deeds necessary for survival, and forced or coerced actions do not qualify. Early in the character's creation, consider what evils your Darklord performed and revisit these crimes as you develop the villain's other details. Those harmed. The people the Darklord harmed need to feel real. Give them names, imbue them with agency, and don't define them as victims or props. The people who survive the Darklord's evil might be part of the Darklord's history, or allies who join the player characters, or might hold the key to righting the Darklord's wrongs. For each character, consider whether they were important to the Darklord and how that relationship changed. Irredeemable. Once the dark powers take an evil person, that individual's fate is sealed. Before the final corruption, a person can atone, but only if they take genuine responsibility, heal the harm caused, and reform to prevent future harm. Once an evildoer becomes a Darklord, it is far too late. Consider whether your Darklord had a chance to redeem themselves and the decision that led to their current fate. I like it. I feel like a lot of times, we're playing good people, good characters, good heroes. We would want to maybe try to redeem the villain, give them an opportunity for mercy. but this book makes it very clear that these are not those people. These are not the mayor who's been blackmailed into doing bad things. This is ultimate evil kind of thing. I also find it really interesting that they have this opportunity for atonement. I think it'd be really, really cool to have a character, either a player character or an NPC that helps the party, that maybe almost was a Darklord, but did atone and like narrowly missed that fate, and now is some sort of like Avenger type anti-hero. I think that could be really, really cool. Darklords are villains because of what they choose to do, not because of who they are. As you refine your idea for a Darklord, determine what deeds a Darklord committed, who was harmed, how the dark powers encouraged them, and the price the Darklord paid. Describe why they chose to commit these evil acts, including their ideals, flaws, and bonds. Consider these questions when creating your Darklord's backstory. What was the first depraved act the Darklord chose to commit, and how did their ideal encourage them down this path? Was the Darklord rewarded or celebrated for their evil? Did that reaction encourage greater crimes? Were those rewards earned or justified? Did the Darklord repeat or escalate their wickedness to obtain something they selfishly desired? Did the future Darklord realize that they were losing any hope of redemption, yet choose to commit other heinous acts in keeping with their flaw? What evil act was so atrocious that the future Darklord's friends and family rejected them? Did the Darklord think this was warranted or an unreasonable judgment? How did they react? When and how did these acts attract the attention of the dark powers? How did the dark powers use these acts to craft the perfect prison domain for the Darklord? You're almost fleshing out that original sin kind of thing, the what took them from a bad guy to the ultimate path of damnation. I think you could have a lot of fun here. Some Darklords have features that make them similar to familiar monsters. The Darklord might have been a supernatural creature to begin with, or perhaps they gained their form and related powers through their deeds or a curse. Maybe they even gained supernatural powers via a pact with the dark powers or upon arriving in their domain. Consider whether or not your Darklord has a monstrous form. If so, in a few sentences, describe how the Darklord gained this form. You might also roll or choose an option from the monstrous transformation table to provide a twist on a Darklord's monstrousness. The dark gifts in Chapter 1 serve as examples of these sorts of forms and powers a Darklord might possess. In any case, consider how this transformation embodies the Darklord's evil. The monstrous transformation table is a D10. The Darklord loses their voice. Their words now carve themselves on their skin as lingering scars. Something the Darklord stole or used in a terrible crime becomes part of their body. Perhaps a sizable jewel, emblem of rulership, or suit of armor. The Darklord's eyes distend from their sockets like a slug's tentacles, in the mouths of serpents or on metallic cables. The Darklord's most painful memories visually repeat in reflections around them or amid illusory projections. The Darklord gains an idealized form, though it's made of an inorganic material, and others react as if it were terrifying. The Darklord's body disintegrates, leaving only an animate heart, hand, gory ooze, or nervous system that must attach to new, temporary bodies. Clouds of incense, insects, poison gas, or smoke leak from the Darklord's mouth, fingers, or pores. The Darklord appears as someone they wronged, and their true appearance is revealed at particular hours in reflections or under certain lights. The Darklord splits into multiple creatures, each representing them at a different time in their life. The Darklord retains their memories and intellect, but is otherwise any monster from Chapter 5 of the Monster Manual. Excellent. So you've got your werewolf, your vampire, your robot, your alien, your whatever. Like a scary dude in a cape. Okay, that could be spooky. But if they start breaking apart, if they're a floating nervous system, if they have these like unnatural kind of tendencies, that'll get you. Upon the completion of the Darklord's greatest irredeemable act, the mists drag them, and perhaps the land around them, into the domains of dread. At this point, you should have an idea of who your Darklord is, what they did, what form their evil takes, and how they came to the attention of the dark powers. Flesh out these details, referring back to how the Darklord reflected your player's characters and the section on creating non-player characters in the Dungeon Master's Guide as you desire. Now everything the Darklord knew changes, and they find themselves a prisoner within a domain of their own. Well, if you follow this step by step, you are going to create one hell of an evil villain here. So this is going to be somebody who is worthy of having a domain of dread built around them. And remember, some of these Dark Lords can be kind of strange things. They don't have to necessarily be like a humanoid type thing. For example, there's one where the Dark Lord and the domain of dread are both a house. I don't get it, but it's there. Okay, so what kind of Dark Lord would you build for your custom domain of dread? Stay tuned for our next video here in FryMinis coverage of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Like and subscribe. Check me out everywhere. See you next time. Thanks.